Hello and welcome. It is 6 o'clock and it is time for the 6 o'clock club. Hi, I'm Andy from Twisted Narrative, and we've got a very special guest, Chris, here from Evil Pidgeon Games. We'll be introducing Chris in a moment and letting Chris introduce himself. But as we always do, we're going to fill 5 minutes with chatting about the games that we've ran last night and the games that we'll be running tonight to give chance for people to get into chat and for the stream, which is on a little bit of a delay to catch up with everybody. So last night I ran Fortunes Untold, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. It was very much a sort of ending of one act and moving to another act. They had delved deep to find a sort of pirate captain's sort of stash of loot that they wanted to get their hands on so that they could use it to ingratiate themselves with the admiral of the debauchery. They spent much of their time sorting through that, actually cherry picking a few items that they thought they'd keep for themselves rather than using as this sweetener. And then they travelled back to Devil's Hole, a small fishing community where they met up with this rogue pirate captain that wishes to overthrow the debauchery. So a fair amount of role playing, some very good sort of thoughts at how they could deal with the future threat. And then they set off on a little side adventure. Um, Due to the fact that the council of the renegade pirate captains is going to take a number of days to organise now that they've got all of this loot, and they want to go and sort of hunt down a witch that got ousted. Hey there, Ian. Hey there, Stuart. Thanks for jumping into chat, both of you. Um, and they got to the island and they're about to set off and try and locate this witch. Supposedly, she has the power to put real ships into bottles, and they might want to use such magics, such witchcraft and hexes to help them against the debauchery. It was great fun. Name check as always. We had Felicity, we had Roz, we had James. Get better, James. He's suffering terribly with flu at the moment. I hope you're okay. And we had Adrian as well. Great fun. I enjoyed it. Had a blast. It was one of those sort of almost downtimey sort of sessions, so not full of action, but sometimes needed to do that admin and kind of find out where everything is before we go into the next arc, which is against the debauchery itself. Tonight we have Critical Role, the Icebreakers, set in the fantastical world of Exandria, created by Matt Mercer. And the Icebreakers have got quite a large number of things to do on their list. I believe they are heading to try and find a certain uh, sort of red gem that was um, left with one of the players when they were nay but an infant, put in a basket and sent down the river, only to be found by a couple of gnomes. The player's character, though, is a Goliath, and that was an interesting sort of backstory. This backstory has come out, and she didn't realise that this gem was left with her. And they are now heading to a town to try and hunt down this gem, find out what the meaning is, whether it has any relationship to a certain axe called Jolene she's wielding at the moment. So it's always good fun. Name check again. We have sorry. We have Jack, we have James, we have James, we have Joe, and we have Adrian, and we have Michael. So 7 players, quite the party, and I'm very much looking forward to that, which is starting in, well, at 7 o'clock. There we go. Exactly 5 minutes past 6 on the button and on the nose. So let us move on to the main part of today's club, which is all to do about this gentleman here, Chris. Hiya, Chris.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me on tonight. Really
Uh,
appreciate it.
an absolute pleasure. Genuinely mean that. I've known you for quite a long time
Mm,
in and out. Um, it's okay. I've known you when you were at university. I kind of feel really old. Chris and I sort of met when I was running the shop in Nottingham, the game store, and we've known each other ever since, really. But
yeah.
please introduce yourself.
Hi there. So I'm Chris, and I run Evil Pidgeon Games, which makes a variety of supplements for D&D Fifth Edition.
And they are very, very nice. One of the reasons why I've asked Chris to come on and talk about them. Um, I mean, let's get a little bit of background from you first. I mean, how did you get into this industry? How did you get into writing these supplements?
So it was really just on an absolute whim, because I've always liked Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing. I've been kind of reading the books since I was a teenager. And I tried my hand a couple of times at novel writing. But a year or two ago, I saw that Kickstarter was doing a zine quest thing in February,
Yeah,
and I was like, "Screw it, why not? I'll give it a go. I could write something." And I had a crack. The first one didn't fund, but I wrote it anyway because I thought it was a really cool idea, and I just really enjoyed writing it. So then I was a couple of months later, I thought, oh, I'll have another go, and set the funding goal a little lower because I was like, well, I would have done it for free, and it funded, and I just kind of started going from there. And yeah, pretty much that's how it went. I just carried on doing them. They started getting some traction.
so what was the name of the first supplement?
So the one that didn't fund that I kind of wrote and just put up on DM's Guild was the Wrath of the Wilds, which is all about the fun things you can do with druids. A lot of it around the Awaken spell,
Yeah,
and things you can do with that. And then the one that funded was called the Halfling Food Festival, which
right.
is all about a traveling fair kind of thing of, well, food,
Yeah,
run by halflings, and it gave like GMs a whole bunch of like shops that they could, have going around the place, a whole bunch of characters. Um, yeah, and I've kind of that's kind of how I start with when I start putting together a supplement is
yeah,
wouldn't it be cool if so that was wouldn't it be cool if there was like a caravan of halfling foodies. The next one was, wouldn't it be cool if there was a midnight black market?
yeah.
Uh, and yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, no, it's I can't recommend them enough, really, especially if you are a GM. They're so sort of flavoursome, and there's so much in them as well. It's not just, oh, it's this fair and here's the vendors. Each of the vendors is named with kind of the items that you can buy, and one of the things that I really like, and it's kind of fairly obvious, but you definitely kind of state it at the start of each of your things is, hey, here's some ideas, but make it your own. And you sort of bring in sort of immediately kind of the reader to, wow, these are cool ideas and I can build on them if I want to. But I mean, that was obviously like forefront of your mind.
Yeah, very much so. Because obviously the books that Wizards produces are incredible, but there's kind of two things for me where I like to do things a little differently. The first is, particularly with adventures, they'll put forward, this is the adventure, here it is, there you go. Whereas, and I think sometimes with the kind of the way they put it makes it a little difficult to stray from it. Whereas I like to give the GMs that read my stuff a lot of freedom. So oftentimes I'll give with, say with the night market, this is my interpretation of how I see the night market, but here's like 4 or 5 different ways you could have it. So I've got it in like an alternate dimension called the Twilight Woods that you access. But maybe it's like this, maybe it's like this, and you can use all those things
Yeah,
in those ways. And the other thing is I used to find with Wizards, they would produce like a book that was here is the book all about undead, here is, and they've moved a little bit away from that, and the books are more general now. I know Fizban's was very specifically dragons,
yeah, yeah,
but I like to go no. This is a book all about a very specific thing for you to like really explore and get to grips with.
yeah. No, it's very good. And coming on to that issue about not just wizards, but just set sort of campaigns. I find them the hardest to run if I'm honest. Everybody would think that they're actually easier to run because
Mm,
it's already written and you don't need to create it. But first and foremost, especially if you want to give the players the experience from the book, you need to give them that book. Yeah, you can do side things with it,
yeah,
but it means that you have to read the book and then
yeah,
understand the book. And there's quite a lot of things in the book that they don't mention to like later chapters. And
mm,
it's like you can't just go, well, chapter one is like levels 1 to 3, so I'll just read chapter one. You need to understand everything
yeah,
that is going on. So I actually I find it quite intimidating. Whereas your product, it's very, oh, I'll just cherry pick this idea and I can place it wherever I want. And I don't get the anxiety that I get
yeah.
when I'm trying to run something that's fairly complex. One of my most enjoyable Wizards ones is Dragon Heist, but it's
Mm,
quite a large number of moving parts that you need to bring together. Um, so
yeah.
yeah, go on.
Absolutely. No, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
So I kind of I really appreciate the style that you kind of written it in. It just makes it simpler to read, less anxious to get right. And your products are kind of different because it's kind of like different surprises within it. I'll I'll say what I mean is you're kind of reading about a number of NPCs within it,
Mm,
and then suddenly there's a map, and it's like a little mini scenario.
yeah,
Um, but you haven't pitched it as this is an adventure with some NPCs. You've kind of almost done it's a supplement. Oh, by the way, here's a few encounters as well.
yeah. I'm a huge bit of part of my philosophy and what I've written is trying to make it really easily accessible. So I rather than giving those like long threads, because also as well, if you kind of vamp a bit and change things and diverge off, suddenly you're over here and you've got to get over here and you're like, how do I get back? So I try and give more ideas and tools.
Yeah,
So yeah, those little maps and they're like little set pieces that if you can just throw them in anywhere or change them or reskin them,
yeah,
they're not the way they're presented isn't absolutely vital to some later thing. You could take the map and be like, actually, this is a castle now, or actually, this is a cave, and they can still use the ideas.
yeah. No, I loved it, and it was kind of like a pleasant sort of surprise as you're kind of reading through the information and enjoying it, and then suddenly you go, oh, and there's this as well. That's a nice little surprise, and oh, I can use that, and it was a joy and a pleasure to sort of read through, and because of those. I mean, surprises really. I mean, it didn't kind of like jump out and hit me in the face, but it was a pleasant surprise. With all of that, it made me want to continue sort of reading. There wasn't a point where you sort of go, okay, I've got this now,
Yeah,
so I don't need to read any more. It's like, well, no, I better read a bit more because I want to see what else, what little other tidbits of great kind of inspiration can be drawn from this. And I really like that sort of style. I thought it
Yeah.
was very clever.
DMs are such busy people, and you don't want to be reading through 3 pages of A4 to kind of the same thing being said again and again.
Yeah.
Just like one point where it could have been done in a paragraph, and the people reading it, smart people, they'll understand.
Hmm.
Which again, kind of the philosophy I've gone for with the design. So yeah, all I've got a couple here as props.
Oh,
All of
yeah.
them are nice, like easily digestible sizes, and like portioned out to be, yeah, hopefully really easily
I
readable.
mean, that is the other one. You say easily to digest, and yes, they are. Absolutely, consume really. Um, but you've got a big page count. I mean, you give a lot for what for your money. Really, it's kind of because I was reading through it, and because of the way that it twists and changes, it's like I was reading through and like, oh well, we must be coming to the end of. Oh no, we're only halfway through. There's a load more of excellent material to enjoy, really. So you certainly give value for money in terms of content as well. Very, very sort of impressed with that. And was that design, or did you just feel like, I can't start. I've got all of these ideas. It's spilling out of me.
A mix of both, because what I could have done is held back a bunch of ideas to, eke them out as sequels or things like
Mm,
that, or volumes. But and particularly with like the cost of living crisis at the moment, I want to give good value for money. And also, I'm really excited about my ideas, and I just want to get them down.
yeah,
And I don't want to be like, oh, wait for next year's Kickstarter for the next one. I just want to know, like, have it all.
yeah,
Yeah, in fact, that actually happened with the Tome of Witches, the one before my current
yeah,
Kickstarter. It just like passed over the stretch goal for having a second player class in,
yeah,
and then like a couple of pledges got declined, and it came just under. And I just told all my backers, I was like, look, I mean, everyone's really excited about the class, even though it's dropped under. I'm still going to do it for you
yeah.
because everyone's excited. I'm excited. Um, yeah. So
I
yeah, I
mean,
just kind of have the ideas and I just want to get them down.
yeah. And the tome, is it Tome of Witches? It is called Tome of Witches.
Indeed.
What was
This one.
interesting about that is you used photographs,
Yeah.
which again was like, again I was reading, and then I was reading that, and it's like, oh, that is an awesome photograph. How why how did that come around, that decision?
So it's I like to change up the styles of art that I'm using to make each book feel a little distinct. And when I thought, hey, because I was talking to a friend of mine as I was writing the Tome of Witches, and she was like, "Oh, I'd love to model as a witch for you." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I could do photographs. That would be cool." And I thought I'd experiment with it, and I really liked the
Yeah,
way it worked. So that's what I'm doing the same for Plethora of Partners,
yeah,
because I've got an ambition to be able to kind of do art for my own books at some point. I'm kind of
excellent.
teaching myself to draw at the moment,
Yeah.
um, which is a slow process. But photography, I can a bit better, a bit more quickly.
Now, I mean, it was an incredibly pleasant surprise, and I mean, the photographs are amazing. I think they definitely feel, each one feels different.
Mm.
Yeah, it kind of blew my mind a little. I'm easy to impress. I like shiny things, but it was really cool to see.
It's something as well I've not really
No,
seen
no,
in many role-playing books, and I thought particularly for and for monsters it's harder, but
yeah,
for actual people, why not have actual people, make them really real?
yeah.
It a lot easier to kind of get into that headspace of yes, this is the character I'm dealing with when they're right there in front of you.
Yeah, no, it was, as I say, a great surprise and very, very impressive. And speaking of characters, um, as one of your supplements, I think folio of familiar faces.
Yeah.
I just really like this idea. Um, um, do you want to explain the idea, or shall I?
Yeah. So what it was is my favorite thing about NPCs is when they come back. When they I get as a player and as a DM really attached to NPCs and I kind of like hang on to them. And as a player it was fine because I just got attached to them. As a DM I was like, wait a second, so it's been that everyone else is like 5 levels on. I've got to this character's got to have been doing something. You know, they're not just, the barkeep that they were before. And I was like, and that was kind of like the starting point of. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, what if you had something to make it easier to bring them back? And so I thought, okay, so I can have a character, several stages for them. But going back to that, like, philosophy of choices. Well, what if, um, like, take the first one in it is Guard Lucille, which
Yeah,
is probably one of my games. She becomes a guard captain from being a guard and then becomes the city champion. What if she didn't get on with the players? What if something really bad happened?
yeah,
Then you can't use those stats or that story. So let's make branching choices.
yeah,
And so, but all of the characters, there's like 6 or 7 different options where they kind of go through this web of if such and such happens, they go this way. If such and such happens, they go this way. And yeah, they can
yeah.
just end up in different
It's
places.
really nice, and I did like that branching pass of, oh, they have a bad interaction with
Yeah,
obviously the players, or the
yeah.
kind of things that the players do cause bad interactions, and therefore there's repercussions to that.
Yeah, because players can be murder hobos, and I think if you write something, like if I were to write something, kind of not taking into account that players are sometimes evil,
Yeah,
it would be a bad thing that I wrote. And
yeah,
in fact, for that reason, there's a whole section and a whole character all about bringing back dead NPCs that you wanted to do more with, um, when the players just murdered them.
yeah,
It was the first thing I thought of. I was like, okay, they're going to murder them. How do we deal with that? Which is another way that I kind of build up the content in my books.
yeah,
Is I start with that premise, then I start asking questions
yeah,
and try and give interesting answers to them. So, what happens if they die? This is what happens.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
I found it really good, and uh, it certainly gave me a few ideas as well. I loved the flow chart for the NPCs and the like, and it kind of reminded me, in a way, it's got nothing to do with your product, but it kind of reminded me of Warhammer Fantasy, where you have your basically different tiers of characters. So you can start off as a rat catcher,
yeah,
and then become like, a city guard, and then become like a witch hunter or something like that. And
yeah,
it was really interesting to see the different sort of tiers and the descriptions of those characters. And I kind of love that little sort of detailing and the like. Uh, we'll come on to, you've got a Kickstarter, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But you did just mention about when you play and when you run games. Let's talk about you a little bit. Are you in any games at the moment, or is it?
So yes, there's been my regular groups have taken a bit of a hiatus because almost everyone in it has ended up in new jobs somehow. Someone's now working for Warhammer, someone's now having to go to Leeds every other week. So it's a we're on like a fortnightly at the moment. But
Yeah.
I normally have a weekly D&D fifth ed game, which someone will run for 3 to 6 months, and then someone else will run.
Mhm.
Um, at the moment, we're doing what was a one shot, but is now kind of like a mini campaign. We got shrunk down. We're fighting with some rats for a ring. It's loads of fun. And then I have a smaller game that I play in on Fridays normally that is kind of different systems. So we were playing Monster Hearts,
Yeah,
and then we've had a bit of a break because of new jobs, but then we've moved on to Thirsty Sword Lesbians,
yeah,
which is just great.
Yeah, yeah.
Both of them are. Monster Hearts is really good. Absolutely loved it. Got genuinely like upset and emotional at some points in the game. What was happening?
It's a good sign of a game.
Mm.
So, I mean, are you still going to focus on 5e product, or with kind of playing these other games now? Um,
So what I want to do, kind of for my community, is kind of what happened with me, which is I kind of went through on largely D&D, which I loved then, still love, will continue to love. But then I kind of got introduced to um, solo journaling RPGs
mm,
through a game called Apothecaria by Anna Blackwell. Absolutely fantastic, love it. Where you're a witch and you kind of go around collecting ingredients to make potions to heal people, and it's very therapeutic. Also, the Wretched, another journaling game, less therapeutic, a lot more harrowing, really good. But I want to start making some solo journaling
yeah,
games. So I think I'm going to start doing maybe one of those like every year to 18 months. Um, but the core of what I do will continue to be supplements that are for fantasy role
yeah.
playing games, that
It's
traditional one.
interesting that you say fantasy role-playing games, because sort of reading your current products, whilst easily used for fifth ed without a doubt, and some things specifically mention fifth ed mechanics.
Mm.
It was also very easy for me to kind of think I could use this for like Pathfinder, or I could use this in any kind of fantasy, without a lot of sort of struggle adapting it. It was
Mm.
quite rules light in places.
Yeah,
Was that a sort of conscious?
yeah, because I I was when I read the books, I want the ideas from it, I want the inspiration.
Yeah.
And also as well, I don't want, people who have other fantasy games that they play to be like, oh well, there's nothing here for me. So obviously there's things like monsters, player classes, spells are statted for fifth edition,
Mhm.
but everything else you could just pick up and put in any fantasy game. Um, and whenever I have like an extra system that I put in, I try and make it so that it's adaptable to anything. So in the current one, there's a system for relationship scores to kind of add some mechanics to building a relationship with someone,
Yeah.
and I think I've put like you add a charisma bonus to something, but that could be anything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you can use it in any, you could use it in Pathfinder, you could use it in um, Mine's Gone Blank, you could use it in
Yeah,
Warhammer, you could use it in
yeah.
whatever.
No, I mean, there's a whole host of fantasy games, and non-fantasy games,
Mm,
because you mentioned it just now, but I do want to talk about your latest Kickstarter, which is funded. So congratulations, but
thank you very
that
much.
doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and check it out, and I'll put all of the links in the description below. And thanks very much to Elsa giving me critical feedback on last night's one. We will mention it again before we end the stream tonight. But yeah, you've got a Kickstarter, and I have to say, when I saw the title and when I saw um, the 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 design of it, the content. Not, I haven't seen the content as in what's written, but the what would you say, the conception of it.
Mm,
Um, I kind of did take a deep intake of breath of, I mean, this is going to be challenging. And then I thought about it, and I thought about it and went, no, this, if it's handled right, this would be really awesome. Um, so I'm putting people on tender hooks here with all of this. What is it called?
So it's called The Plethora of Potential Partners, and it's another book of NPCs, but this one with an aim to creating partnerships with them. So kind of that theme of recurring NPCs. Some of the most rewarding sessions and like bits of games I've had are when my characters kind of developed a relationship with an NPC, and I've been very fortunate. I've had incredibly skilled games masters that have run that, but it can be really tricky to do. And so I wanted to create a tool set for GMs that wanted to include that in their games. But equally, romances, not everyone's cup of tea. So what I've tried to do is to make it so that the relationship score system um, can be used not just for romantic relationships, but also for if you want to become business partners with this person, if they're just a friend, if they're a political ally,
Yeah,
and each character has like their background, they have how to role play them, related NPCs, and then they have like a table of the stages of the relationship, which as you progress up the relationship score, you hit different
yeah,
stages. And then at each stage, it details how their behavior changes towards you. Um, and some of those are kind of specific to being in a romantic one with them. Like at one point, it might say, at this point, they'll suggest settling down with you
yeah,
and marrying. But you can take that framework and very easily just tweak what's in those boxes. So instead of at this stage they'll suggest marrying you, or maybe this questing knight says at this stage they'll ask to join your party,
hmm
or the noble woman at this stage she will suggest sponsoring you guys' party, becoming like a patron and
yeah.
sponsoring expeditions. So it's very easily adaptable. It's the romance is there, but it's not impossible to like take out and just
Yeah,
swap
yeah.
with other things.
No, I mean, when you think about it, I mean, there's sort of thinking outside of um, tabletop role playing at the moment. There's a lot of video games where Dragon Age is one of them, kind of thinking about, but there's a whole gamut of others where
Mm,
you build up these relationships with the NPCs, and most definitely behind the scenes there's the dialogue that you have
yeah,
triggers flags that kind of
yeah,
allow you to become friends or allies with them, or enemies. So I do think it's fascinating. I can't really think outside of those kind of games that it's been touched
mm.
on in a tabletop game before.
Uh,
There
not,
are,
not
yeah, I was going to say Monster.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to go, because I've had some, relationships in a couple of games, but Monster Hearts is the whole game is about
Yeah,
relationships, really. And it's it's really raw, it's really powerful, and it's really beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I again cannot recommend it highly enough. And I thought it gave me the inspiration to try and bring that more into other, areas of role playing,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
No, I think it's for me genuinely some of the best times is building up those relationships with, certainly when it's NPCs and
Yeah,
players, because it can be incredibly dramatic when those NPCs suddenly are in peril, or when they
yeah,
turn out to have done something wrong or have got a darker history. And then, if the players care for the
yeah.
connections, it makes it substantially more dramatic. So I really love this idea. But with relationships being a tricky subject, you were saying that you had some help in sort of modifying or kind of reading through it to make sure that you've got it right. And
Yeah. So I'm really a big supporter of diverse relationships and having diverse characters and relationships in role-playing games, having
Absolutely.
proper representation. So there's a section that talks about kind of LGBTQ plus relationships,
Yeah.
and I've not specified sexual orientation for any of the NPCs. I've kind of left it open for the games masters and the players to
Yeah.
decide. And I've talked about that. I've talked about kind of some trans characters and players, and how they work in a magical world, which
Yeah.
is incredibly well. And just to make sure that, because I'm a big supporter of kind of those groups, I'm not one of them. So I had a couple of people kind of read through it as sensitivity readers to make sure I handled it
Yeah.
properly.
No, that's
Uh,
brilliant. It's good to see that extra mile has been trod, because um, it's about getting it right, isn't it? And
percent
having someone to sort of check over that work. I constantly have to keep second guessing and questioning myself all the time about everything that I do, and uh, I like to do that. It's not hard work. It's something that I think
Yeah,
is a very important thing to do. I mean, it sounds fascinating, and yeah, I'm gonna sort of obviously pledge and get a copy, and I look forward to seeing what. Uh, I've really enjoyed everything else that you've done, and I've got absolutely 100% confidence that this is going to be very, very cool to read.
thank you so much.
Um, so, what about the future then?
So I've kind of, because when I make my supplements, I try not to waffle. I kind of go boom, boom, get all my ideas down. I turn them around quite fast. So my next one should be launching sometime in end of March, I think, end of March, beginning of April. Because this one's already about 70% written.
Yeah.
And by the time it comes to funds coming in, it'll already be finished and printed. The next one, this is the first place I'm announcing it,
Oh,
uh, is going to be all about crime. How your players can like do crime and the different types of crime they can do.
can we just clarify how the players' characters can do crime? Because we,
Yes, that is a very important legal distinction. How your players' characters
yeah,
can do crime. Um, and I'm going to make sure that all the details are put in are like specifically fantasy. Like you can do it
yeah,
with this spell. Um, yeah,
absolutely,
how the characters can do
yeah,
crimes. What kind of crimes might look like in magical societies. Like for example, in England, you're not allowed to carry guns. Maybe there's some equivalent thing for spellcasters,
yeah,
which have essentially guns and more at their fingertips. But also, as well as, and this is how your players do crime, this is how the world deals with crime,
yeah,
because the the system of guards and law and order is going to be aware of what people's capabilities are, and they're going to have ways of dealing with it. So it's always fun to have one druid prison break where the party are put in jail, the druid turns into a mouse and then into a lion, and the players escape.
yeah,
That's fun once. But the next time, particularly if it's somewhere really big like the capital, they're going to know what druids can do. And when they
yeah,
go, you're a druid, are you? You're coming in the airtight cell, which is exactly what one of my friends did to me when he was running. He knew me. He knew I was playing a druid. And he was like, "No, you're staying in jail, and I'm going to make sure." And I loved that. I still think about that.
yeah,
So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing for my next supplement. And hopefully this year I'll be able to get my solo journaling one done. I'm
yeah,
kind of in the early stages of it. It's working title is Scratched, and somehow part of your mind has ended up in this kind of back rooms, liminal space kind of area inhabited by these awful creatures, and you're trying to get out. But I wanna make it really interactive, or sorry, immersive. So like there'll be a stat in the game as you play, sanity or something.
Yeah.
As that lowers, there's going to be suggestions for things to like do in the real world, like every couple of hours pretend you can hear scratching at the window to kind of really give some weight to what's going on in it.
All right.
Um, but that's
Interesting.
very early
Yeah,
stages.
yeah. Very interesting. So a lot more to see this year, even.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. We are coming to the end of the show now. So I want to firstly thank you very, very much for coming on and chatting about Evil Pigeon. And um, I will put all of the socials and sort of links down in the comment section on the YouTube videos. But um, can you tell us where we can find you?
So you can find PDFs of everything I've done at itch.io, I think / Evil Vision Games. Andy will have a link. Um, for things like my physical copies, currently these are only being sold through not Patreon,
Kickstarter.
Kickstarter. Thank you. They're available as add-ons to all of the projects I do. So even if you're not interested in a particular project, the £1 tier gets you access to the add-ons, which means you can get a book. If you really love my stuff, I'm also on Patreon. I do. This is for the top tier. You get like a physical zine sent out to you
Oh,
every 3 months.
lovely. That's got a lovely shiny cover as well.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely love it. I opened it and I spent like half an hour just looking at how cool it was.
What do you put in the quarterly zine then? What?
So every month I do a 10-page mini zine, which all my patrons can vote on what there is. So the first one was called the Mycelic Mass, which is this thing.
Mhm.
And there's just like a couple of monsters, adventure hooks, what's going on, a combat map, some magic items, and there's one of those every month, and then quarterly for the top tier you get a physical one sent
All
out,
right, nice.
and every 3 months you get a physical one and a free PDF of any of my books, and
Oh,
every 6 months you get the quarterly, a free PDF, and a physical book sent to you for no postage.
awesome stuff. You can find Even Pigeon Games on Twitter and Facebook as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Does that right? So if you want to if you want to check Evil Pigeon out, you can go across there and um, sort of message Evil Pigeon Games, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, check them out. Don't take my word for it. Take your own word. Go um, do your own investigations. I don't think you will be disappointed at all. Um, and I say, as I say, I'll put all of the links down in the comments once the video comes to an end. So, without further ado, I'd like to say a big, big thank you to you, Chris, for joining us.
Thank you so
It's
much for having me.
it's been fascinating talking about the processes and about your work. I'm a big fan. Thank you to everybody in chat. I know you've been quiet today, but that is because one would hope you've been very interested in the conversations that we have. If you're watching video on demand, thank you. It's me from the past. You're in the future. Um, don't forget about us though, Twisted Narrative. I quite often forget. Give us a subscribe and a like if you like what we're doing. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock club, a very different one as I myself are about to be interviewed by Ian. I've got absolutely no idea what he's going to ask me or whether you'll be interested, but we'll find out tomorrow, same time, same place, 6 o'clock. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.